I've always, hoped that afterwards, like my consciousness kind of just like shoots out into space and I can kind of like go wherever I want and I can like, go check out a black hole or some shit like that.
Yeah.
Like that would be my ideal, like,
Yeah.
after death scenario, I guess.
Yeah.
So
No,
I'm
you're bringing
I'm
up some
always
good
I'm always
stuff, man.
agnostic about that.
Yeah. I mean, when I was when I was younger and when people are young in general, I think that a lot of people just kind of just can't even like unconsciously or consciously or subconsciously, it's like we don't believe that we're actually going to die or something. Like we have this
Right.
sense that it's like, no, that's not
Right.
going to happen to me, but it's like um
Even now, I'm like, well, maybe they'll figure it out.
right, right.
Maybe they'll figure out this aging thing before I kick the bucket. Like
Yeah,
it's kind of crazy how we still hang on to that.
right.
We're
Yeah,
just we're just dumb apes that are clinging to like crazy idea that like
yeah,
I mean, it is the first time that we're looking at aging as a disease, and maybe we could fix it,
right, right.
with like and possibly with like CRISPR and like human
Yep,
genome mapping and stuff. So I
yep,
mean, if there's a time to think like that, maybe it should be now. But still, like
yeah,
I don't think that they're gonna fix aging in my lifetime, and I'm gonna be like plugged into some mainframe forever.
yeah, yeah, dude. I mean, I've learned some stuff about CRISPR and that sort of thing. I don't spend for some reason I don't spend a lot of time thinking about literal immortality these days, even though like you're saying, I mean, if it's like right now would be the time that we could talk about that sort of thing, because there are potential technological possibilities and scientific possibilities that will allow at least people to live a lot longer at the very least.
Hmm.
um so it's definitely worth like thinking about and considering. But um in a lot of these old spiritual traditions that I've been reflecting on and researching, there's this notion that there's there's infinity, which if you go back to early pre-Socratic Greek philosophy before Socrates, and even during the time of Socrates, and even
Hmm.
after that, but especially like the earliest Greek philosophers, there was this trend of trying to say, well, what is the most fundamental component or element of reality, so you have all these philosophers who are having these different theories about, well, this is the most fundamental thing, this is the most fundamental thing. And there was a guy named Anaximander, and his idea was that the most fundamental component of reality was infinity. And I'm really interested in him and other, like, in India, it was there's a similar theme in a lot of early Vedic texts where
Did we
and
did,
other
did did we know of we that they knew of infinity as a idea and as a quote unquote measurement back then? I mean,
well,
I don't
even
think we
air
I don't think we knew that space was infinite, essentially infinite,
no, 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 I
and
mean, they didn't know it in the same senses that we feel like we know it now. I mean, I know there's still mathematicians and scientists who don't don't believe that there really truly is something that is infinite. I mean, there's still a lot of scientists and mathematicians who are like, no, 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 if you really think about it, then there is something, it's finite, it's not completely infinite. But um
but that would
I
have
mean,
to be, something, whatever fuzziness that we see at the end of, as far as we can, see, of the universe, it would have to be something completely different than what we actually know or perceive, there's not going to be like a brick wall at the end of the universe.
Right.
Is it just going to be like, is it going to be like the simulation just stacking like, space and planets, as fast as possible, like to make it ever grow and expand, or like a computer like program trying to like, keep up, or, or is it just like this fuzzy ether that just like, blanks out at the end? Um,
Yeah, I mean there's this crazy there's an interesting relationship between emptiness slash nothingness slash zero and infinity. You know what I mean? And they're in some ways they seem like they're one and the same because I mean if you imagine like what if we think about the traditional scientific creation myth of the Big Bang, then it's like, okay, well, what did that explosion, um, what space did that explosion manifest inside of? It's like, and then if the universe really is perpetually expanding, well, what is it expanding into?
Right,
And,
right.
and,
Exactly. Like what is that? Like there has to be some form of like matter, or like what is that made out of?
exactly,
That it's pushing into.
exactly.
Like what's the gel around the universe like holding everything in,
Right. Right, right. And so I mean, that's it's like one of the biggest questions you could ever try to wrap your head around, which I don't, you know, I have no clue. I mean, I don't think anybody really could have like some sort of capital T true conclusion about that. Maybe someday, but for me, it makes the most sense to think that
Yeah.
whatever I
Like
mean, for one,
speaking
I think that that's just our universe.
speaking of, I have a brief, well,
Oh, nice.
it's universe in a nutshell and brief history of time
Love
on
it.
my coffee table.
Love it.
Always trying to uh, understand even the smallest amount of it all.
Yeah.
Even though
Yeah.
I'm not great with numbers and math, but
Yeah. Me neither.
um, that's kind of like I believe in the Big Bang, and I believe
Sure.
in the math behind it, and think Stephen Hawking is brilliant, and all the mathematicians that had to do with coming up with Big Bang and singularity and all
Sure. It's
these
impressive.
ideas. It's very impressive. It's one of those things that it's so impressive that I have no way to fact check. I just have to kind of
Right.
take it on gospel.
Right.
And um, it's almost one of those things that's so mind numbing and like and insane to think about that it's almost easier to say, okay, there has to be a higher power that created all of this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just that explanation where you're talking about like, okay, what was the space that it came out of,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
what was there before, and why did all the matter in the known universe, how was it already that dense that
Mm-hmm.
exploded? You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like all
Mm-hmm.
these questions, like it's almost easier for me as an agnostic to be like, you know what? All right, I can buy that there's just a higher power that let it happen, that
Mm-hmm.
snapped their fingers and then it happened, and then they kind of just like let it ride. You know what I mean?
For me, I think that the universe does not have okay. I think that the Big Bang is, I don't have a problem with accepting the Big Bang theory, but the thing is I think that that's just possibly what happened at the beginning of our universe. And I personally believe that the multiverse, or maybe we could just say the cosmos, is beginningless and endless. I don't think that there was a beginning. I know that sounds crazy, but I truly, on even on a logical level, when I really think about this stuff, like, even if there is some higher power that put in motion or created the universe, well, then you got to say, well, what
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 created them?
caused or what created that creator. And then if we think that something always has to have that first cause, then it's going to be this endless cycle of like, well, what was the first cause of that? What was the first cause of that? Because so I feel like, at least for my own, mental consolation or something, I feel like, for me, I just feel like the cosmos does not have a beginning or an end. I think that it's likely that our universe started in a similar way to what the Big Bang theorists say, but I think that there was probably an infinite number of universes before that.
Hmm.
And I think that, for example, if our Earth, or even if our whole solar system somehow was dissipated or destroyed, then there's still an infinite universe out there. There's still existence. So when it comes to that thing that I was saying earlier about that which is invincible, or that which is actually, you could say, maybe not created or destroyed, ultimately, that would be
So it completely,
being itself.
it'd be so annoying. Be
What's up?
It'd be so annoying if after, like right after death, you literally like all the answers in the universe that you've been seeking, like come to you, and the meaning of life, how we all got here, like what happened in the beginning. Literally, like you meet with like not even like a Abrahamic God or whatever, but you meet with
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
creator of the universe, and they sit you down and explain everything to you,
Mm-hmm.
and you
Mm-hmm.
have everything, and you can't come back and share your amazing knowledge that would blow
Right.
minds.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, dude. Yeah, this is fascinating stuff. I just want to say that, number one, just to kind of round out my point about the infinity thing, what I've noticed in my own feelings and interpretation of things that I've reflected on and read about, there's this idea that infinity, or emptiness, to me, those, in some ways, those are synonymous. If we think about whatever the universe came in, like whatever the universe manifested inside of, and whatever the universe is expanding into, you could say that that is a sort of emptiness or void, but you could also say that it's a form of infinity, because it's infinite potential, you know
Mhm.
um because everything that is finite, you know so there's this notion that infinity, in its infinitude, right? Because infinity is infinite, then it creates infinite forms endlessly. You know, infinity creates infinite forms endlessly, and the paradox is that each of the individual forms are finite. you know my body is finite, your body is finite, this beer bottle is finite. Ultimately, all of the forms are finite. But and so there's this notion that goes back thousands of years in philosophy and spiritual traditions, that the timeless, or the infinite, or the eternal, I guess, that's a word that I don't usually use, and I don't really prefer that one, but the even the formless, or the unmanifest, is another word for it. The unmanifest slash infinite slash emptiness, um maybe create is not even the best word. Something I prefer these days is becomes. Infinity becomes all of these finite forms, and each individual form is finite. And the reason it does that is because if the unmanifest remains empty or formless, then there is no evolution, there is no change, there is no transformation, there is no interaction. the way that evolution happens is that, forms become more and more complex and more, kind of more individuated. And the more individuated all the, and I mean, even if you look at the history on a scientific level, you look at the history of the universe, and things become, they kind of go from being a more formless to more and more high level forms and more complicated forms. And then those more complicated forms start reproducing with each other and start propagating, creating more and more forms. And
Right.
so it's this idea that in order for evolution and growth and expansion, I guess is a good word for it, evolution and expansion, for those things to occur, infinity has to become finite. It has to become all these finite forms, because if it remains empty, if it remains void, then it's just going to be void.
Hmm.
There's nothing interacting with each other, so that's something I've been thinking about. But I do want to ask you, in relation to some of the stuff that we brought up, another thing I've been researching is near death experiences. Have you looked into near death experiences at all?
I haven't gone any further than watching the Netflix documentary, but that was pretty fascinating.
The series?
Yeah,
That was cool.
yeah.
That was cool. So what are your thoughts about that? I mean, do you I don't know, when you hear or read or watch people talking about their supposed, pretty insane, pretty intense and unique experiences in the NDE space, like
Hmm.
what do you feel about that?
I that's it's tough. It's like it kind of, we were talking earlier about aliens and UFOs, and there's I guess in the documentary that I've been watching, there was a Harvard professor that gave a lot of interviews with people that had been abducted by aliens, right? And
Yeah.
John Mack was his name, and
John Mack, yeah.
yeah, he got famous for being this like really well respected scientist that was like giving like actual like credence, and writing like books to these people that would be considered nut jobs like elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
But all their experiences are like aligned. They hadn't met each other, and all of their experiences when they were under hypnosis or
Yeah.
therapy, like all their stories were kind of lining up like the same. And I
Yeah.
think it's kind of the same thing with NDE, is like when there's that many people that have the same stories about like astral projecting out of their bodies, and um and uh, I can't really remember what other than like the ER table, like astral projection and
Yeah.
and others. I know there was other things that like really like line up, but
Yeah.
both of those things, when you have that many people that have like
Parallels.
spontaneous parallels, yeah, that are just literally out of this world, that are kind of defy definition or logic. I don't really know what to do with that, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I can only take them at their word, because like in almost all those cases, what do they stand to gain? Um,
Right.
they like a lot of those people, they were just looking for help. They weren't looking for fame or money. So like,
Right.
what's the point of like of coming up with such an
Fabricating some crazy.
ostentatious like story?
Right. Yeah, it's crazy, man, because I spent a lot of years just not putting any stock in, like, any sort of afterlife, for one. Even as spiritual as I am and have been, like, I for a long time didn't put any stock in reincarnation. Never, I didn't even consider much of the validity of like any sort of consciousness after bodily death. For some reason, I just, it wasn't something I thought was that legit. But in the last several months, I've just been doing more research on near death experiences, and it really just kind of shakes me up and makes me realize how little I really know and understand. And I think it's it would be I mean, in some ways, it would be unscientific to just shoot that stuff down because of some of the things that you said. I mean,
Mhm.
because there are so many cases and stories that have so many parallels from people who didn't seem to have any sort. I mean, it's not like they were looking for. I mean, a lot of times it causes suffering in their lives, and a lot of people around them think they're crazy for saying
Mhm.
stuff like that, but they say it because it's what their
Right.
experience was. So um and so so many of these people that have the NDEs, their brain is completely shut off, and somehow their consciousness you know can know what's going on in another room of the hospital, know what's going on in the hallway, and then gets blasted into some transition or threshold where they either go through a tunnel or climb some stairs or whatever, and they go into this world of light. Just based on the books I've read and the stuff I've watched, some of the
Mhm.
parallels is that they go through some sort of threshold, and it depends. What's interesting is that threshold depends on their cultural conditioning. People from Japan, for example, have like a different image of what that threshold is, a different experience of what the in between, the going there is. And then people in the US
So
generally
like
have it.
the you meaning like just based on like the architecture that they're used
Yeah.
to, like the doorway and the hallway of what it
Yeah, and
might
maybe
look
even
like.
archetypes or maybe
Yeah.
symbols that represent certain things to them. It's like tunnels. I mean, we have so many, like, we have like the cliche of like the light at the end of the tunnel type of thing. Like we have this
Right.
image of the tunnel being this. And so a lot of people in the US in near death experiences, they experience that threshold as a tunnel, and then they go into a world of light. And it's so crazy because the skeptical side of me is like, no, what? But then you read all these stories and you're like, I need to just kind of process this data, because they go into a world of light and then they communicate with either kind of one entity of light or multiple entities of light. Sometimes they see relatives and stuff like that, which there's a bunch of theories about why that might be. But nevertheless, one other parallel is that those beings of light communicate with them telepathically. There's no verbal communication that
Hmm.
happens, which is similar to
Similar to the alien abductions. Yeah.
exactly, that telepathy, this instantaneous communication from mind to mind. You think a thought, and then all this, it's like it's communication that is not verbal, it's not linguistic, it's telepathic. And another thing with the whole NDE thing is that being of light, and I mean, for one, so many of these people that have these accounts were not at all religious or not at all spiritual, before this happened to them. And they end up
Right.
encountering this being of light who then one of the things that goes back to ancient Greece. There are ancient Greek writings about NDEs that line up with shit that people say today, which is the one of them is the, what do they call it, the life review. So the being of light somehow gives them this life review, which is basically this instantaneous flood of
It's
every
lit.
single moment of their life.
Yeah, it's like the cliche of like the projector once you get to heaven and you
It
see your
is
whole life.
it is a cliche, but
Yeah.
maybe there's something to it. Who knows? So they get this, and what they say is that there's no time, no space, kind of. They feel like there's no time, there's no space time in the way that we think of it. And so everything is happening in this weird light sphere. And then they get this life review where in a split second, every single moment of their lives flashes in front of them. And not only do they see and feel every single moment of their lives, but they somehow can feel the way that it felt for every single other person involved with all of those moments. So, if I had a life review in this context, and I was thinking about all the experiences I had with you, then I would somehow feel every single thing that you felt during all those moments too. So it's this crazy empathetic thing that happens. And so it's just really fascinating, man. It's something that I'll probably be looking into for the rest of my life, because it's just, there's too much intrigue to really just push it to the side, you know?
Right. And my question would be, as an amateur NDE, kind of um, explorer, I wonder if there's anyone that it takes it to the next level, and they try and is there like a scientist out there that's trying to manifest NDEs in otherwise healthy people, like take yourself to the brink of death and then come back and then document it? I mean,
Not that I
like,
know of. That's an interesting
there's been
question.
crazy scientists, before that
Sure. There's a dude named Tom Campbell that you should look into if you haven't. He is a he has his own version of simulation theory, which I know you're interested in. But he claims, he's a physicist too, but he claims that he has accompanied people in his own consciousness that go through the NDE experience. And he's somehow, because there's a guy named Bob Monroe in the 70s who was this guy who wanted to study out of body experiences scientifically, because he had had several spontaneous out of body experiences, and then he could, on command, uh, create these out of body experiences for himself. And he trained other people to try to be able to do that same thing. And Tom Campbell worked in Bob Monroe's labs in the 70s. And he got to
was
the point, he claims, that he could do the same thing. And now, like, he claims that he can accompany people into that NDE space as they're dying. And so he reports
right.
what's going on over there, because he says that he can go there on will.
He's like a he's like a I don't even like a what even you would call that, like a death's door traveler, like where you get to the edge and then
He
you come
does.
back and then you report
Yeah.
on it. Um, how like how does that even see like this is like even far beyond like it makes me think of like meditation. Like, I've been I know I haven't been taking it as seriously as I should to get better and better.
Mm-hmm.
I've done, you know, I've done some of the Sam Harris classes and lessons,
Yeah.
um, and just overall, using apps and YouTube, and Mindspace or whatever
Yeah.
it is, to to meditate. But it's one of those things that meditation and also what he's claiming that is, it's kind of, um like you can't really study that or graph it, you know what I mean? like
Yeah.
like like I I see Sam Harris and I believe that he's basically an expert, like meditator,
Yeah.
but there's no way to prove it. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
because
Right.
it all happens in your brain.
Exactly.
Like,
It's all
so it's
subjective.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's like, how do you know when you're getting good at meditating?
Right.
And 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 there's no test. There's nothing to rate you to see, like, have
Right.
you advanced? It's
Right.
just it's just you and your brain. And
Yeah. Yeah. That's a valid question. That's a valid point. I think that, we're so trained to be able to assess things and review
yeah,
things
and we're
in
built
that
on
way.
standardized testing and stuff.
Right.
And this
Exactly.
is a
So it's
practice.
conditioning.
This is a practice that's completely different.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And I mean, when it comes to meditation and practices like that, the way to gauge it, I think, is just to say, well, has this affected the way that has this affected my well-being at all in a positive way? And if it has, that's great. And if it hasn't, maybe try out different practices. But you're right. It is slippery. It's tough to know if you've like advanced it at all or whatever.
mhm.
Um, But on last point I'll make about the NDE thing, man. I mean, there's theories about old school baptism. There's theories about old school baptism. Like I mean, there's theories that John the Baptist, was at least influenced by the Essenes, Essenes, which was these kind of radical spiritual communities around that time and before, who, these rituals that probably go back far before that. And there are theories that people were basically inducing near death experiences by almost drowning themselves. You know what I'm saying? Like
Okay.
there is the idea that that was part of this whole idea of like rebirth and stuff, where you would be underwater long enough where you would have a NDE and then come back and kind of be reborn, as well as the illusion mystery, or Eleusinian, sorry, I think it's Eleusinian mysteries, which was in ancient Greece. 2 times a year, people would go to Eleusis, this place in Greece, and they would have some sort of, a lot of people think it was some sort of, they would take psychedelic substances. There would be some ritualized situation where people would either have something like a near-death experience or something analogous to that, which would, even Plato, the philosopher Plato, he went to Eleusis for the Eleusinian mystery ritual at least once. I think that most people, I think maybe it was just kind of a one-time thing that they did that, but a lot of the Greek philosophers say that the whole impact that it had, whatever was going on over there, whatever type of rituals or psychedelically induced experiences or whatever, was that they were it made them unafraid of death in one way or another. That was the whole idea, is that they had some contact with the other side or something, and
Right. They're like, that's not that bad.
they came back and said, you know what, like if that's what it is, then I'm cool, everything's
Right.
good, like I don't have to fear death anymore. And a lot of people these days who have near death experiences, that's one of the most interesting parts to me, is that they always come back. Sometimes, sometimes it's difficult for them because they've had this crazy experience and nobody else in their lives has had that. So it probably makes them, it's tough to communicate with people on that, like about that sort of thing. But nevertheless, it always makes them, it transforms their lives, and whether it transforms their lives so that they're not afraid of death, or it makes them, because it sounds corny, but one of the main messages that a lot of these people get that have NDEs is that, for one, those light beings that they encounter, those light beings are not judging them. They're not saying, damn, you should have done this, I can't believe you live like that. It's they
Right.
always the whole notion is that the light beings, again, telepathically, they're not even talking to them, but telepathically are saying, did you did you did you live a life of love? And when they have the life review, the whole question is like, well, were those actions out of love or not? And then it makes them come back and think, well, shit, love is the most important thing, and I mean, that's beautiful, that's simple, and
Right.
that's kind of that makes sense to me. um who knows how or why that would be built into reality like
Right.
that.
Do you think that love is as natural as space and time? That it's just kind of something in the universe that can't really be measured?
I mean, Tom Campbell, the guy I mentioned that does use the word simulation to describe this sort of thing, his idea, which as far as love goes, makes sense to me, because philosophically, it's hard for me to articulate the inherent nature of love in the universe. It's still something I wrestle with, but his idea is that he says that the he calls it the larger consciousness system. He says that the larger consciousness system partitions itself into all these separate consciousnesses that end up becoming avatars in the material world. And the reason that the
This is
larger
us.
consciousness system, yeah, us, or even any other conscious being that's not a human, he says
Okay.
he charts it all out. He's got his own way of thinking about, well, what makes a being fully conscious or whatever. But if we think about just human beings, like his idea is that the larger consciousness system has created all these individual, he calls it individuated units of consciousness, which is a pretty cool phrase. So he says that the larger consciousness system creates all these individuated units of consciousness that then log on, metaphorically log
Sure.
on as avatars into the simulation in order to be faced with difficult choices and decisions and life situations that force them to either evolve their own consciousness or not. And the whole point, and it goes back to my idea about the whole thing about infinity becoming finite. The one reason theoretically that infinity becomes finite is so it can expand, evolve, and it can experience love.
Would that avatar machine be infinite, just infinitely pumping out like
Totally.
new
I think
avatars?
so.
Because
I think so.
that was kind of always my argument with reincarnation. I was like, all right, so if that's the case, like, or is it recycling old souls, or is there like because if you just come back as something else, that almost implies that the amount of souls are finite, right?
Yeah, see, that's something I've thought about too, and I have no clue about the number of individuated units of consciousness or
Or
souls or whatever.
or can you come back as like kelp and it's not it's not
Right.
even a soul.
You that's something I have no clue about, but even the Buddhists say that it's fortunate to be incarnated as a human, because human beings do have a weird predicament where they're kind of like in this weird threshold space. It's like we are animals, but we also have a consciousness that allows us to do a lot of other things that animals can't do. I mean, we have a self-reflective consciousness and a consciousness that allows us to have a huge imagination, and we can imagine into the future and imagine the past and imagine different scenarios. And so as far as the love thing, I really don't know. That's something I'm still wrestling with. But I mean, there's got to be a reason that wisdom traditions for time immemorial have honored love as kind of this central force or component to the universe and ourselves. And intuitively and emotionally, that makes sense, because no matter what I learn spiritually, it always comes back to love. Because if you know a bunch of shit about any given topic, if you're not receiving or giving love in your life, then you're probably dissatisfied. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so it seems like love is kind of this primary thing. And even if that's just some trick that nature plays so that we keep reproducing, I mean, or keep wanting to be alive and all that stuff, that could be possible. But I think I don't think it's that simple.
Two things on that, going back to the individuated units of
Yeah.
consciousness, and
IUOCs.
the
Yeah.
avatars. That's a mouthful.
Yeah, I
um
know.
I got an Oculus recently, and
Dude.
it's pretty nuts, man, when you make your avatar, and they have like this like area now where you can like go and meet up with other avatars, and like for like concerts and shit, like they'll
That's
have
awesome.
like a camera for a concert, or like a show or a fight or something, and or a movie or whatever. Like there's a movie theater that you can go in, and like it's just playing like TV shows or movies, and there's
Yeah.
other people in there with their avatars, and you can hear them talking or whatever. unfortunately right now it's like mostly like kids or whatever, and I'm like, y'all are like 12 years old, like what are y'all doing here? But it would be like the ideas are limitless. It'd be very cool if there were um different interests and hobbies, kind of like subreddits on Reddit where you could go in and as your
True.
avatar and just chat like about like what we're talking about now.
Yeah.
But it really is like the fact that you can have an avatar that almost kind of looks like yourself, and then you walk up to someone in this digital world, in this simulation of a simulation, and talk to
Right.
them is really freaky, dude.
It's so
Like,
crazy, man.
and you've got your controllers and they look like hands and you can like high five each other. And it's
Yeah.
so weird. Like, um, it's just like, I don't know, like as Elon Musk said, like I think it's only natural that, if we can do what we can do now and it's almost looks like real life, like of course we're going to get to something that is akin to just like real life
Yeah.
in the VR world, and we're going to be completely lost in it.
Yeah.
So who's to say that we're not already there, but just in somebody
True.
else's? Um, you
True.
know, I like I like a couple conspiracy theories, and that's probably the one that I would be most sold on.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah,
I wanted to transition into, you know, UFOs and extraterrestrials and interdimensional beings and stuff, which I mean, there it seems like I don't know. It seems like all that kind of stuff is at least somewhat related, potentially. I guess when it comes to UFOs, I mean, it depends on if you're leaning toward if the UFOs are intergalactic beings that are coming from different planets or star systems, or if you lean more toward these are interdimensional beings that are somehow popping into this dimension from another dimension, which I guess
right.
would be more
A lot
akin
of
to um parallel with the NDE space or something, because um I mean, from all the stories with the NDE stuff, I mean, it seems like it's another dimension that people are experiencing. And so how do if what is the thought or feeling or theory that resonates with you the most when it comes to UFOs, or I guess unidentified, what's the new UAPs?
UAP, unidentified
Yeah, unidentified.
aerial phenomena.
Yeah. What's the thought or feeling or theory that kind of hits you the hardest with that,
Uh,
about what the
I
hell's going on?
Yeah, what the hell is going on? Um, I kind of vacillate between the two sides of, okay, our government is super shady, kind of always has been, and they've always been secretive about new technology. So, maybe the whole like Roswell, UFOs is like a psyops like project where they literally just like leak out like small like you know uh video or information out there just to kind of like satiate the masses.
Yeah.
And it actually just is government technology that they've been working on. um and
Mm,
but that also begs the question, why, if they're that advanced, if they're so much further advanced than we even um thought about or could imagine. Because I
yeah.
mean, some of these videos, I don't know how many UFO documentaries you've seen lately, but
A
I've pretty
lot.
much I've pretty much seen them all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the phenomenon, and the one before that, pretty much anything that's made by uh
Stephen Greer.
Stephen Greer. Yeah, Stephen Greer has a couple. And then you've got the Tic Tac UFO incident with the Navy pilot. You've got a
Jeremy
couple.
Corbell, dude.
Yeah, Corbell, the filmmaker. You've got David Fravor, the Navy pilot, that literally saw a UFO like under the water and then shot up to like 80,000 feet in like a second. So you're talking about like speeds that are like literally if there was a person inside there, like they would be like eviscerated, from the
Right.
G forces. Like there's no way.
Right.
And there's also no propulsion system. Like there's no anything. There's no fire or smoke or like
Right.
anything. So if they're that, if the government has that kind of technology, they would also, I think, already have like a cloaking system, or they're being seen by people on purpose. You know what I mean? Like if you're that far ahead, like we're not gonna be able to capture you with with a fucking iPhone. So I go between that idea and then of course straight up aliens. Which you know and but then you also have to ask the question, what if they have that technology and they literally came from another solar system or galaxy, what are they doing here and why are they allowing themselves to be seen every once in a while? You know what I mean? And
Right.
why doesn't the government like seem to just not care? um Maybe they know they're completely outgunned and they're trying to like keep people from not from getting spooked, because they
Hmm.
need that aura of control and power.
Yeah.
But I don't know, some of the stuff that I've seen, I think I'm always like on a little bit on the alien side because I want to believe,
Yeah.
and I prefer when the world just has a little bit of whimsy to it,
Oh yeah. Me too.
a little bit of magic.
Oh yeah.
Um and I think that it's hopefully more likely that they've already been here and they don't like really mean us any harm.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
but that sounds a lot more fun than just your government is are dicks, you know
Right. Right.
and they constantly lie to you.
Yeah. I mean, I think, unfortunately, I think that the government usually is a dick. But but I think that like uh yeah, I mean, I feel from all the stuff that I've consumed about this, it seems like the government has you know what's the word for it, they have in their possession uh craft, or at
Material,
least
or at least material.
material, at least
Yeah,
material.
yeah. On
um
one of those documentaries, there was literally like a Harvard like what is it called, a metallurgist or whatever,
mm,
that was like trying to figure out what this material was, and he was like,
yeah,
this is not any known like man-made material. Like
yeah,
it has different like a different like makeup and like some chemicals or like atoms that we can't create this element. You know what I mean?
right,
And
right.
that was crazy. That was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still, I mean, I'm still open-minded and I don't have any concrete conclusions about it, but it seems like the government does have they have access to, or have, somehow acquired in one way or another. Yeah, at least chunks of material that is from technology that they are trying to reverse engineer and trying to be able to somehow understand slash replicate. And that's maybe one of the main reasons why they're trying to keep it so private, is that they don't want anybody else to be able to back engineer it and recreate it, because then it would take their power away or whatever. And it
Mhm.
seems like a lot of it is probably military motivated or whatever, trying to back engineer this stuff so that we can have better weapons of mass destruction and stuff like that, unfortunately. So it's really interesting because people like Stephen Greer obviously believe that these extraterrestrials are beings of love, basically. I mean, that's kind of his notion, is that they're beings of love, and that they mean us no harm. And I mean, I understand that, because if they do exist, and they have con have made contact with certain people and have come to this
Mm-hmm.
earth, and if they are so much more advanced than us, then they easily could destroy us, and they
Mm-hmm.
haven't.
Mm-hmm.
So that might suggest that they aren't trying, they're not out to destroy us.
Mm-hmm.
I guess maybe I guess theoretically they would be coming here to have some sort of communication for us, and or communication with us. And if that's the case, that's an exciting theory, and it would make me wonder, or it does make me wonder, like, if that's the case, then it's like, well, maybe they're waiting for the time for us to be collectively ready for us to actually, like,
Get there.
yeah, to be ready
Like,
to actually communicate with them and
yeah,
have some sort of alliance, because they
yeah,
realize that maybe on a big scale we're just not ready for that, because
right.
of various reasons, whether it's people's skepticism or disbelief, or just people's selfishness or violent motivations, or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
um
What that also means, I think, is if they got to that stage of technology where they're doing interstellar travel, that also means that they got through the great filter. They didn't blow themselves up. They were able to harness their emotions and get past all the petty bullshit that we're dealing
yeah,
with right now,
yeah,
and get to the point as a species where they realize that, yeah, maybe like love is all you need,
right,
and we don't need to squabble over like war and politics. Let's just focus on doing dope shit in space.
right,
um
right,
so
yeah,
so just the fact that they got there uh makes me think that they're a peaceful species,
yeah,
because I don't think a warring species and a warring tribe can come together and become a space faring species. You know what I
right,
mean?
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, and if not, like, there's worse ways to go than an alien invasion.
Oh, sure,
At
yes.
least that'd be pretty fucking exciting.
Right.
Like, definitely wouldn't be bored. Like, I
Yeah,
mean, yeah,
yeah.
it's way better than like crapping your pants in a nursing home and then just
Yeah, true, true,
having
true.
having a heart attack. So I
Right.
would take
Yeah.
alien invasion as a
Oh, sure, yeah.
possible death. When I think of aliens, I think of them as, I don't think of them as individuals. I think of them
Hmm.
as like one of many with a common, like, with
Yeah.
a with like, and they're probably so advanced that they literally don't need to talk. You know what I mean? Like we
Yes.
were saying earlier, like they're probably just completely on the same level. Like, and
Yeah.
that's why I guess I inherently think that, like, that they're kind of just like one for all. That they're
Right.
that they're not like super individualistic.
Yeah. I mean, that might be
Um,
true.
but maybe,
And
maybe one
maybe
goes
they're coming
goes
from a
rogue.
bunch of different places, though. Maybe from a certain place, or a certain dimension, or a certain planet.
You think it's
They
possible that
all
different species of aliens all got to the same point and then found us around the same time?
I think that
Because there's a lot of like different alien species. Like there's the tall
yeah,
whites, and
yep.
like there's like the short
The
grays,
gray, yeah,
the
exactly.
grays or whatever.
Right.
I have no idea where all of these kind of came from.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
uh, Obviously somebody um, either made them up, or I guess these are supposedly aliens that came from, what they people could remember, from um, uh, either abductions or
Mm-hmm.
contact, of the fourth kind
Mm-hmm.
or what
Mm-hmm.
have you. But there's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, there's like five or six types. I
Oh
can't remember
yeah.
all of them, but
Yeah, yeah, no, you're right. And so I have no clue, man. It just blows my mind wide open. I really, it's just something that I want to learn more and more about. And I think that, there's one side of me that I think it's possible that there are just light beings out there. I think a lot of the footage that I've seen and stuff, I mean, it seems like sometimes it seems like straight up craft, you know, um, and sometimes it seems like beings made of literal light.
Well, the
Um,
video that you posted that was shape shifting,
that was
that was
wild, right?
like all light. Yeah, that was very weird. I haven't
Yeah,
seen
that
that one.
kind of thing is crazy. Yeah, that was fascinating to me. Um, do you feel like have you ever had any experiences or convictions about the power of manifestation, for lack of a better word? Do you feel like you have been able to use your mind to manifest stuff in your physical reality?
Um, I hmm, I read there was a book that I was reading. I think it's called Stumbling. I think it's this one. Um, do you know this one? Stumbling on Happiness. It's pretty
No, I
good.
haven't read that one.
Um, it's a mostly like a psychologist take on what's what's truly important about happiness. But I'm pretty sure that was the one where he was talking about kind of what we were talking about earlier was it Socrates or Plato that kind of discussed um um manifesting happiness. Which Greek philosopher? I can't remember. Was it
I don't know about the manifesting part, but I know that Socrates was very
was
interested
it
in
Socratic?
in in that. Yeah.
What were there was like laws like and they were named after him. Anyways, but yeah, they were just talking about that. I think that it's very I think it's possible for some people to kind of just like will it into existence.
Hmm.
I think for others it kind of it might be a slippery slope because it kind of goes into the whole like the book, like the woo woo book, The Secret or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like about like manifesting
Oh
your
yeah.
success and destiny.
Hmm.
And and as he was saying in the book, I think it was this one, either this one or the Darren Brown book. It could have been Darren Brown. Anyways, um, he was talking about how that can be all well and good, but also like you need to realize that you know um it's also based on your effort and limitations
Oh
and
yeah.
like maybe it's just not feasible for you for me to be an NBA player or
Sure.
to learn how to be you know the best like also like limitations on your environment like
Oh yeah.
um you know we say that to kids they can be whatever they want, but that's not always the case. It really is based on on such shitty things like where you were born and your environment and what lucky breaks you might get in life,
Oh yeah.
and what help you may receive in your network, and it just doesn't, the sad thing is it just doesn't work out for a lot of people,
Right.
like life
Right.
life is really cruel to people that might actually be optimistic and trying their best,
Yeah.
and that might be hella pessimistic, but I know that it's happened where somebody was just giving it their all and they probably ended up quitting because it just life just beat them down.
Right.
um
Right.
i I think it's a mixture of both. I think it's a
Yeah.
mixture of will and manifestation, and
Conditions.
yeah, conditions. I don't know if you want to call it, divine interference or just plain luck, but I think a lot of really successful people, and they'll probably tell you themselves, like they got lucky,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, whether it's being born, here in the United States, or at least to a fairly successful, family. They had the options and the resources. No one gets there alone.
Right.
There's really no such thing as a self-made man. You really
Hmm.
have to re- a lot of times rely on your neighborhood and your. I mean, that's even what Arnold Schwarzenegger said. He's like, a lot of people think I'm entirely self-made. I have this inspiring story where I came from Austria when I was 14 with no money, and here I am, the governor, and I'm super, super successful.
Hmm.
But even he like wouldn't have got to where he was without the network of the guys in the gym, that like inspired him
Hmm.
and like helped him. And he was poor, and he would just like basically live at the gym, and they would feed him,
Hmm.
and so on and so forth. And that got me thinking about how it really isn't. You can't fully will yourself into where you want to be. It's got to be, uh, it's got to be the environment and
Yeah.
and and a little bit of luck.
Yeah.
Um, I like to think that I've willed some good things into my life, but I also um, am actively trying to do better about like kind of just like just going along with things.
Hmm.
I think I've had like an issue with kind of just like with just like kind of going through life like taking it as it comes and not just
Yeah.
like buckling down and saying I want that and like and going for it.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to do better with that. So
Yeah.
I don't know if you call that manifesting, but I'm
I think that's
trying.
part of it. I think that's similar. Yeah, you brought up some good points, man. I mean, it for one, it reminds me of what you were saying about meditation. If somebody is interested in trying to experiment with manifestation, or some people in that field are uncomfortable with the word manifestation. They would prefer to say selecting. If you think about the quantum field of potential, and you could imagine that, we can, as a thought experiment, you could imagine that we can select certain probabilities, I guess, even things that are restricted, like you were saying, from our upbringing or environment or the people around us. If you look at all of those, if you look within all of those confines and you're trying to select certain probabilities, then, I mean, I think the first step is exactly what you just said, which is actually buckling down and being like, well, what do I really want, instead of just always kind of passively going with the flow, which is
Yeah, I mean,
something that's so.
take our chance meeting by example. Like,
Exactly.
I went to West Georgia because my brother went to West Georgia. Like, that's the only reason. And I think
Yeah.
I applied to like two or three schools, like
Yeah.
maybe, like,
Yep.
and like I was just like, well, it's pretty close to home. I can come back, for some food every once in a while, and I know that I still want to like hang out with my brother because we were so close growing up,
Yeah.
and it just made sense. He was like, yeah, it's cool, and I was like, all right, I guess I'll go there.
That's
and
cool. Yeah.
and it was just like, and I'm glad, I met you and so many cool people, and I'm glad that it happened, but it really wasn't like a manifested thing.
Sure.
I
Sure.
just
Sure.
I
Sure.
just
Sure.
kind of like went along with it.
Yeah.
Even baby, I was just like, my friends started a band in the apartment, and I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna do this, and
Right.
I'm gonna try and join. And then it just kind of happened, and all of a sudden we were on the road like half the year, like
Yeah. Yeah.
for 10
Yeah.
years. And that was now a third of my life, you know what I mean? And it kind of
Yeah.
just happened,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. It's there's, I mean, what I was going to say about the meditation thing, I think that as you were saying about meditation, it's hard to assess how much it's like it's a subjective thing. It's a personal thing. You have to like gauge how much you're getting out of meditation just from yourself. And you can't rely on anything else except your own assessment of it. I think it's the same with trying to manifest stuff in your life, is that you just have to assess it for yourself. I mean, we can come up with all these arguments about why conditions and environments and circumstances prevent people from manifesting what they want in their lives, and that is valid, and that's true to consider that. But nevertheless, like when it comes down to it, it's just about our subjective experience, because that is the thing that is the most direct and intimate. And so but yeah, that's a great point about us meeting each other, meeting important people throughout college or any time in our lives. Like so much of it seems like it was just chance or happenstance, and there is that element of this weird natural mysterious flow that like kind of just leads you to go through certain things or meet certain people in ways that you were never at all consciously trying to engineer.
Mhm.
um
It makes me
and
almost want to just like stop what I'm doing now, pack some shit up in a box, and just like move to Denver. You know what I mean?
right,
Or just like
yeah,
completely change my path.
right,
Like absolutely, do something
because you
that
never
I
know what's going to come out of that sort of thing, man. It's
yeah.
the butterfly effect. You change one little thing, and then literally every the chain of events that manifests out of that one decision, whether you consciously were trying to bring those very specific things into your life or not, every single decision creates a different reality, kind of.
Mhm.
um but one last thing I wanted to say in relationship to what you were saying. I think about karma and what I've been calling like personal dharma lately, which means if you think about all of your own karma, meaning not, I mean, a lot of times when people use the word karma these days, they just kind of think about it as a negative thing, like bad karma or whatever. But karma really just means like the law of cause and effect. And so if you think about all of the karma in your life, meaning all of the countless forces and events and circumstances and details that have shaped how you got to this moment right here, which is really what karma is. I mean, even before you were born, all of the crazy factors that allowed you to be born, to the parents
Mhm.
you were born to at the time, and all that stuff. Like there's no way that we could ever chart all of the factors that allowed us to exist. I mean, it's insane. Even,
Right.
going back to before planet Earth was even in existence. I mean, all of the factors that allowed planet Earth to manifest into this universe. I mean, and then of course we couldn't exist without that. So it's just like these countless factors that allow us to exist the way that we do, which that's what I think is karma. I mean, you could think about karma as a macro thing, all the big things that shape us, and then micro karma would be in our own personal lives, all of the decisions and all the circumstances and the people we've met and all the details in our own personal subjective lives that lead us right here to this moment. To me, that's what karma is. And so if we take our own karma and we say, okay, we kind of become aware of all the things that bring us to this moment. So we accept our own karma, and we see our own karma. But then personal dharma would be just like Sartre said, the French philosopher, who said that freedom is what you do with what's been done to you. So any sort of freedom, and I know that we've referenced free will not in this conversation but before, which is maybe we should have a whole podcast about free will. But this, I really like this idea of freedom is what you do with what's been done to you. So your personal dharma is taking all of your karma into consideration and then working within the confines of your own karma, but actually having an active role, you using your own agency rather than just being passive. Even though, like you were saying, I mean, there's so many things in our lives that crop up that seem like we were just kind of passive recipients to it, whether it's baby or me
Mm-hmm.
and you meeting or
Mm-hmm.
you going to West Georgia. For me, like it wasn't some grand, active agency for me to go to West Georgia either. It was, I had checked out a couple schools, I considered this and that, and then I kind of felt like I randomly was like, well, this is where I'm going to end up being. And so there's so many decisions that we do make that are kind of like half baked or whatever.
Did you and Al do that together? Kind of.
Me and Smith,
Oh,
because
okay.
Smith's my age. So
Yeah.
Alex was still in high school. Me and Smith, and then my girlfriend at the time, Jenny, we all three decided that we were gonna go to West Georgia. But I mean, dude, it's just crazy to imagine like if I didn't go to West Georgia, like where would I be right now? Because I never had any idea, for example, of being an English major before that. And there's so many things that happened to me in Carrollton at West Georgia that it's impossible for me to know if those things would have happened in their own, like in another version, if I didn't go
Mm-hmm.
there. Um, so it's really crazy how things unfold.
We touched on evolution earlier.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was before we recorded, but like I've always had the like and so we talked about evolution, and obviously just because like we branched off at some point from like the great apes, um that doesn't mean that evolution ever stopped, right? So we
Oh
just
yeah.
like where it's still continuing, and we don't really know like where it's going to go.
True.
It'll probably, it'll probably end up in some form of, the singularity, or being pumped into a hard drive and living forever type deal.
Right.
But I was watching the documentary about mushrooms the other day. Did you see that one
The
yet?
new one on Netflix. No, my brother told me about it.
Yeah,
I need to watch it.
yeah, it's dope. But it's just talking about like the neural underground, like the neural like network of like mushrooms, like basically like you know like billions and trillions of like cells like spread out and like talking to each other, and then they also like are connected to the tree roots as well, so they like help each other out, like if one is like in drought or whatever, and needs some nutrients, which is just, and also like apparently we're closer on like on the gene line, like our DNA is closer to mushrooms than like a lot of things,
Hmm.
like most things,
Hmm.
um like more than like some animals, I think. So like it's just really crazy. But
That's crazy. Yeah.
we have a very rich history with mushrooms, and especially psychedelic mushrooms. Like there's a lot of people that think that you know, the pre-hominids, were picking up these mushrooms and eating them off the ground, and then some made them start tripping, and that's what
Yeah.
kind of that's what a in the Bible, it talks about, the
Eating the
burning,
fruit.
eating the fruit, but also the burning bush. So
Totally.
it's possible that this was just a hallucinogenic experience that got them closer to God
Yep.
through drugs of some sort,
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh
And then
yeah.
also like eating the mushrooms, if you have a pre-hominid type character, that starts tripping, and it literally expands their mind,
Yeah.
to a degree that they've never even been able to a point where they have to come up with language to
Yes, exactly.
you know what I mean? Like, and that's where
Yeah.
language was born, because they have to
That's
be able to
Terrence McKenna right
describe.
there.
Yeah, they have to be able to describe what happened to them in their brain, because it was just so
Yes.
crazy.
Yes.
Um, so like that's always it's kind of been one of my questions, is like how is evolution that smart? You know what I mean? Like it's smarter than we are.
Yeah.
It's like, is that just the is that just the force, as it were, that kind of binds
Mm-hmm.
everything, and it's like this universal like language, and
Mm-hmm.
it's in everything, and it binds us, and so on and so forth. Or like, what, I'm not smart enough to know like what is the universal and root
Mm-hmm.
intelligence that kind of
Mm-hmm.
guides
Mm-hmm.
that evolution.
Mm-hmm.
Why, how would it already know? Like, you don't see evolution making many mistakes. Like, how does it know that, what it's supposed to be and do? Like, you know
Mm-hmm.
um
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I
No,
should
that's
have.
something that's really fascinating. I think about evolution a lot, and there were many years where I was so fascinated with the question of like the evolution of consciousness, like how the hell did human consciousness arise? And I love Terence McKenna, and his theory is very similar to what you were saying, the stoned
What's
stoned
his
ape.
what's his best stuff? I actually am not super familiar with
Oh
Terrence.
God, man, Terrence
um
is the man, dude. I mean,
I
he's got a lot of great books, but I just watch
just
watch
YouTube.
his YouTube stuff. He's got
Yeah.
so much YouTube material. I mean, he died in the year 2000, so even though he saw the internet start to take off and he had a lot of interesting theories about the internet, he didn't get to really see it pop off, and obviously in the way that we
Yeah,
did.
that
But
sucks.
I mean, he's got thousands of hours on YouTube that people have uploaded. But you know, he has a book called Food of the Gods, which puts forth his theory about like the stoned ape theory, which is similar to what you were saying. He thought that really the thing that accelerated human consciousness was when apes started going out into the savannas of Africa looking for food, and they started eating psychedelic mushrooms from cow shit, and started
Hmm.
expanding their minds. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of stuff there. I mean, as far as evolution, as a force or something that's just kind of, immensely intelligent somehow. I have no way to wrap my head around that, but it seems like, Terence McKenna and a lot of other scientists have had the theory that, um, the way that evolution works is that it takes the complexity of what comes before it, and then it includes that complexity, but then it transcends it somehow. So it's every 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 stage is taking the complexity before it and somehow using that as a springboard into accelerating into new complexity. And I think that that is kind of how it works. And as far as, I mean, for so long, it was biological and physical evolution. And of course, that still happens. But with human beings, it has shifted more from biological and physical evolution to cultural and technological
Right,
evolution.
right.
And I mean, and Terence McKenna talked all about this. He said that more happened, and again, he died in the year 2000, so he didn't even get to really see how much his theories actually were so true. But he would say that more happens in a day than used to happen in 1,000 years. So it's like things are speeding up,
Right.
and that's all technological and cultural evolution. So I mean, even going back to like the Richard Dawkins, like when he wrote
Hmm.
about memes in the 80s, and
Yeah.
how it's like from genes to memes, it's like memes being just packets of information that are easily and wide, spread on a vast scale, and those things get reproduced. And so it's almost like information, it's like the evolution of technology and information that's been happening now, that
Yeah.
allows us to maybe get to a point where it's like a singularity point or something.
Yeah. Yeah. When memes first started taking off and getting like more popular, I remember, hey Joe. I remember like telling people that like there would probably be like memeologists in the future that
Oh
were
yeah.
like or like trying to like unpack and decipher like what we were trying to like communicate.
Yeah.
And now I think it's like it's almost an inevitability, because so much of our culture is done through these templates. You know, we
Right.
take a template that everyone agrees on, that everyone knows the baseline, right? And then we add layers of information and ideas onto that,
Yeah.
and for different effects. You know, obviously, you know, for sometimes you can use the same meme template for opposing, you know, ideas and and
Mm-hmm.
politics and so on and so forth. Um, but I think that it's definitely going to, there in the future where people will have to look back and be like, all right, what were they trying to say here?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
because so much of our discourse is done through that, through I mean, just you know, look at Afghanistan memes, look at COVID memes.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest stories of the week and of the day are always done through memes. And especially as our generation, I think we're
Mm-hmm.
so kind of not despondent maybe, but we're so like resolved to like how kind of like how crappy life can be because we've been
Mm-hmm.
through a lot as a generation
Mm-hmm.
already, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Just with like recessions and like constant war
Yeah.
and now a pandemic, and like we've been through a lot, that like memes were kind of like our way of just being really cynical and
Yeah.
trying to make light of like how
Oh yeah.
crappy, like in many ways, like the last 20 years have been.
Yeah, that's
So,
true. Yeah.
and I think there's going to be a lot to unpack for future like
Oh yeah.
anthropologists.
Once people get more and more distance from that sort of thing, which I mean, memes aren't going anywhere, but if
Right.
somebody in the future
And
really deeply
they really have
analyzes.
changed.
Oh yeah.
Like the
Yeah,
meme
yeah.
culture 1.0 with the advice animals, and like there was how simple they were. It was
Yeah.
just like a duck with like words on top. But now memes are so weird, and like
Yeah.
internet 3.0, that you have to like understand like seven memes before it to understand
Yeah.
what that means. Like
Right, that's true, man.
it's
Yeah,
crazy.
that is interesting. It's something I used to think about that sort of thing more, but I haven't as much these days. Um, but I mean, even if you think about the internet itself, if we think about like technological evolution and how if it really does operate by the same principle as just evolution in general, in the sense that it's taking from the complexity that came before it to create more complexity, then I mean, the internet includes almost, I mean, the internet includes the majority of all of the technological innovations that happened before it. I mean,
Mhm.
from radio to video to texting to, I mean, all these technological innovations that the internet includes, and then by including it, it's creating further complexity and it's like fractal. It's like these constant um replications of the same models, but then it's just creating further and further complexity. So
Mhm.
it's crazy shit, man. I mean, I still love the internet, honestly, and I just it's wild how much, just like anything else. I mean, it's just how people use it, because the internet can cause so much harm in our lives, and
Oh
can
yeah.
cause like so much addiction and distraction and
How did
despondency.
I never see you using your social media for like getting like caught up in like these like awful like like arguments and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that's true.
How do you stay away from that? Like
Man,
how do you keep your like how do you stay at like how do you not comment on some dumb shit that like a friend or acquaintance might have said about something that's absolutely not true? Like, is that tough for you?
I have before, I have commented on stuff like that, but
I don't
I
see
mean,
you I don't see you engage that a whole lot.
Yeah, I mean, for one, I just use social media a lot less than I used to. I really just
Yeah.
I don't really post that much these days. Sometimes I miss it, you know. Sometimes I'm sad and sometimes I'm like, shit, I need to start posting more on Facebook and Instagram like because I miss that as a form of connection with people, to be honest with you. Um but part of it comes from just having a personality that is kind of non-confrontational, I guess. As much as I love truth and as much as I love dialogue and as much as I love being honest and sharing my own views about things, like I'm just kind of a non-confrontational person. So that's part of it. But I mean, another thing is that like I just my mind is usually elsewhere. It's like I mean I'll go through periods where I'm really thinking about and keeping up with political stuff that's going on, and I have my own points of view about it. But if I have the desire to post something on somebody's like thread about something, a lot of times I'm just kind of like, what's the point? Like, why am
Hmm.
I really doing this? But I don't know. I'm not sure why I can, restrain myself from that. But I guess a lot of times, really, most of my friends and most of the people I follow on social media kind of have, pretty similar views to me. In my own off of social media, in my own personal life, I mean, um I love to talk to people that are on a completely different tip politically, and I try to be, I try to stand my ground and say what I really think about it without trying to um I think it's so easy to just get caught in this trap of being like um you know just trying to prove how right you are and how wrong somebody else is, and then you lose sight of somebody else's humanity.
Hmm.
And I mean, the truth is that most people are just regurgitating something that they've heard, and some ideas that they inherited, and so many of those ideas are just coming out of fear and closed-mindedness. I mean, there's so many elements involved, but I do love I mean, I think that dialogue and conversation is like the most important thing in the world, to try to like a, a way for people to connect even beyond their differences, so I love to talk to religious people that are like fundamentalists, that really have rigid views that are very different from my own, and I love to try to challenge them and talk to them in a way that I'm not trying to be antagonistic, but I'm just trying to have a dialogue that might open both of our minds. And same politically, but a lot of times I mean, on social media, I guess sometimes I'm like a little bit cowardly when it comes to that. I just don't even want to go there, for better
Hmm.
for worse. um but
Well, I think
yeah.
I'm gonna try and join you there, just because like I just got into it a little bit earlier with some people from like my hometown, Douglasville,
Uh-huh.
and it's just like about like just COVID and vaccines, and
Yeah.
it's never gonna you're never the more you push and ask someone to get the vaccine, the more they'll resist.
I know,
And
right?
at this point, so it's like you're just gonna do what you're gonna do, and we're just never gonna get out of this
I
situation.
know.
So it's like I just don't even care anymore. So
I know it's hard,
um,
it's hard to know because, it's like that whole thing where you have to know your audience or whatever. Like some people, unfortunately, just are not going to change their minds. And like you said, I mean, the more you push, the more they're going to push back, and the more
mhm.
they're going to get even more rigid in their views. And it's like, well, what's the point of me trying to push you to see a different way when it's actually just going to reinforce your own views about it?
Yeah,
And
no
then
point
it's
at
like,
all.
well, what the hell is going to change their mind? Maybe nothing. I don't know. Um, but yeah, I mean, even it's like you came out to my brother's crib when I was back home, and you saw his views about certain things that are different from mine or
Right, right.
yours, and so that's he's an interesting case because he is somebody who I feel comfortable to kind of pretty much talk about whatever with, even if my views is very different. Like I'll usually bring it up with him. So it's cool as like an experimental ground with him because like
Hmm.
I do feel comfortable and confident, and I feel like we're not really going to get in a fight about it, even if he does remain very, stern on his views and I do on mine. But
Hmm.
I mean, at the same time, it's usually it always usually feels the most healthy and useful to just talk about something else because
Yeah.
there are a lot of things that me and him do vibe with and resonate with each other on, and that actually even agree on. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
dude, I mean,
You're like we can be friendly and be brotherly on these whole range of issues over here
yeah,
and interests that
yeah,
we agree on and like doing together.
yeah,
There's almost no point in making that
exactly,
a thing. So
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at on that. But
Yeah.
dude, this has been cool, man. I
Yeah,
think that we should wrap
I
it
guess,
up.
I guess we should save the actual
We'll save the
the Abrahamic religion bits for part two.
Hey man, I'm totally down. I would love to
Because
talk to you about that, and I would love to have a part three, bro.
yeah, we didn't get in there.
It's
I
all good. I
definitely
mean, it just kind of happened how it happened. I think
yeah,
we covered a lot of good ground.
yeah, definitely got into didn't get into some, weird uh childhood, the reasoning for, I guess, my skepticism. What we can get into.
Yeah, well, it's always good to save more for later, man. So, let's do it again, dude. Let's do it again sometime soon.